Bonjour, Kijo Yale. Yo, guys, welcome back again today. Today we're going to be talking about the first and only Haitian king. Henri Christophe was born into slavery in the Caribbean country of Grenada in 1767. His mother and father would be brought to Grenada from West Africa. He would become property of a French ship captain and traveled around the Caribbean for many years working on the ship. During this time on the ship, he would work as a mason, bartender, sailor, and other ship duties. He would be brought to the island of Saint Domingo, which the island would eventually be split into two countries, which are Haiti and Dominican Republic. He would be sold to a sugar plantation. These sugar plantations would be some of the harshest in the Americas. Many slaves would die on plantations, but many more survived the conditions that most other people could not. At only 12 years old, he would be called on by the French government to aid in the American War and American Revolution. He would go on to fight in the French Regiment in Savannah, Georgia in 1779. The Battle of Savannah in the United States would be very deadly and injure him. This would be his first encounter with war and the fight for freedom. Once fulfilling his duty to the French, he would be brought back to Saint Domingo. For the next 10 years, he would work as a waiter at a hotel and also as a mason. Christophe would eventually be able to buy his freedom and join the free blacks on the island. The French Revolution would start and free Africans would rise up with enslaved Africans to revolt against the French plantation owners. They would also fight against the Spanish and English, who were trying to take over the island due to its extreme wealth from sugar plantations. Toussaint Venture would lead blacks and would go from town to town, freeing them. Christophe, who was free, would make the decision to side with his brothers. Understanding the brutal treatment of slaves, he would aid in the freedom of his people. He would become a sergeant under Toussaint Louverture. He would be part of the Fontaine's Legion, which was 545 free Negroes. Jean-Jacques Dessalines would also join in the rebellion and would rank higher than Christophe. He would eventually make Christophe a general. In 1793, Toussaint Louverture had freed all the slaves. Just 8 years later, in 1801, he would establish the island as a semi-autonomous island. The very next year, in 1802, Christophe would be placed in command of the port town of Le Cap. That very same year, Napoleon of France came into power. Napoleon wanted to stronghold the island again to re-enslave the Africans for profit. A French force under Charles Victor Emmanuel would arrive in Le Cap in February of 1802. Christophe would lead a defense against the French and then would set fire to the town before retreating inland. Christophe, and at the same time Louverture, would use guerrilla warfare in the mountains. Just 3 months later, Christophe would surrender to the French under the conditions that him and his soldiers would be incorporated into the French army. Christophe also wanted to keep his rank as general. This same deal would seem to occur many times, as other defeated Haitian commanders wanted the same thing. Louverture would eventually take the same deal as well. This peace would only last for a short period of time though. Louverture would be took to France to be imprisoned and died there, while Christophe's son was also took and killed just a few years later. Christophe would then rejoin the resistance now led by Dessalines. The war would be brutal and many people died on the Haitian and French side. The French would also be plagued by yellow fever, in which the Haitians seemed to not be affected as much. In 1804, Dessalines would declare Haiti as an independent nation and make himself Emperor of Haiti. Only 2 years later, by 1806, Dessalines would be murdered due to internal politics. General Alexander Pétion's men would rush the emperor at Port-au-Prince. Pétion's men would expel the royal family and took over the country, becoming the president. Soon after, General Christophe would break away the northern part of Haiti and create a northern state where he became president. This northern state would be called the State of Haiti, with the capital being Cap-Haitien, and to the south, Pétion would rule the Republic of Haiti at Port-au-Prince. To the north, Christophe would start by establishing border security while having many battles with Pétion to the south. Christophe then established a constitution. To the south, Pétion would model a democracy after America and supported revolution in other countries from European colonizers. These actions would gain him much praise and love from his people, but would slow economic growth and trade due to European countries not wanting to trade with him. To the north, Christophe traded with foreign nations, controlled agriculture at the state level, and redistributed land to the citizens. Christophe signed a treaty to not get involved with foreign policies, and in return, the United States and Great Britain would trade with his state. He established many friends, such as British abolitionist William Wilberforce, who believed slavery was wrong. He also formed a friend with African-American intellectual Prince Sanders. Sanders wrote very highly of Haiti and highlighted how Black people could run their own country after slavery. He would encourage Black people to move to Haiti. Sanders would eventually move to Haiti and become one of Christophe's advisors. In 1811, Christophe would take on the king title and turn the north into a kingdom. At first, the people did not accept a king and his single rule. He was seen to some as a soldier that had become a dictator. Complaints and revolts were starting to circulate around the kingdom, so Christophe created advisors and a nobility structure. How he did this was to establish the Code Henri. This was a set of laws, and it also promoted learning and education. Code Henri would set up ministers to help the king advise the kingdom. After doing this, the people overall accepted the new king. The king would hold most of the power with 6 ministers and an appointed chancellor. The Code Henri also created pensions, nobility titles, and the passing of power and assets. Generals, richer noble families, soldiers, and many other things were also created. He would hire teachers from England to establish national schools, made the state's religion Catholic while still accepting traditional African beliefs, created a nobility system, a monetary system, and hospitals. He even built massive castles and citadels in case the French came back to attack the country. During his reign, Christophe built 6 castles and 8 palaces. Sanssouci Palace was built for the king in 1813. The palace had a hospital with royal doctors, a chapel, a mining sector, printing shop, and barracks. Queen Marie and her 3 children lived in the palace. Royal staff also lived in the palace, and the king owned 20 plantations and forts throughout the kingdom. The citadel La Feur was located not too far away from the royal palace with 200 cannons on the side of the mountain. This location was picked for a high vantage point, being hidden in the mountains and centralized. Battles between the north and south would break out as well. Neither's army would cross the other's borders. Both generals used politics and propaganda to speak of the other general's shortcomings. Pétion in the south stated he believed in the struggle against tyranny in the north. Christophe stated Pétion masked the false embodiment of democracy. Christophe also rallied against the blacks and mulattoes of higher class in the south. Pétion would also make himself president for life and that he would choose his successor. In 1818, Pétion would die and his aide, Jean Boyer, would become president. Boyer was also a soldier in the Haitian Revolution from France and served as Pétion's minister and secretary. Christophe would send a proposal for Boyer to join the North, and in exchange, Boyer would get the title of Marshal. Boyer would refuse and went on to send many spies to the North to excite the public. Boyer's plan would not work at first, but after a battle at the border between the North and the South, King Christophe would capture and kill all the Southern officers. These officers would be prisoners of war, and the Northern citizens took note of how the king started to treat others. King Henri Christophe also began to work the normal man harder. This would be especially true when the harvest was bad and taxes increased. This was starting to be a recipe for revolution. Riots would start to break out in 1820. Boyer saw this and sent more spies to excite revolution in the North. King Christophe was starting to hear word of his assassination, and riots were starting to break out in the North. After a stroke in 1820, his health took a turn for the worse. A rebellion would break out in the North, and the capital city would be took under revolutionary control. With the revolutionary soldiers on their way to his palace, and word even some of his closest advisors might be plotting against him, he told his closest advisors to leave him. King Christophe would kill himself with a silver bullet. Once the revolutionaries got to the palace, they took control. A big population still considered King Christophe's son, Prince Victor Henri, to be the next king. Soon after, Prince Victor Henri was hanged and his mother and sister was exiled to Italy. Boyer would seize this opportunity and send his army to the Northern Kingdom. By force, he took over the capital and united the North and the South into Haiti. Boyer would make himself president for life of all of Haiti. Boyer's next thought was, to be truly recognized as an independent nation, Haiti would have to cut a deal with France. In 1825, he would sign a treaty that Haiti would pay France a certain amount of money for loss of slave property and trade. This was for exchange of diplomatic recognition in Haiti's independence. There would be a third king and monarch in the early 1900s and another attempt in the late 1900s. Others have tried to establish a king again for Haiti, but it has not yet happened. So you guys, today we learned about the first and only Haitian kingdom. It's really interesting because before this Haitian kingdom, there was actually an emperor and empire of Haiti, which is very interesting to know and understand. This is that at one point Haiti was an empire, and after that it was a kingdom, and then it became into just a country. This stuff is amazing. I mean, I couldn't understand why anybody wouldn't want to know this, wouldn't want to learn this. I mean, wow, just wow. This stuff is really amazing. But yo guys, until next time, please like and subscribe, turn on the bell notification so you get all my videos, and also hit that subscribe button, because if you want more of these type of videos, well, you have to subscribe. Add me on all social medias, which is Afric Network, which is Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, Snapchat, Facebook, and TikTok. Each one teach one. Always learn from each other, always love each other. And yo guys, until next time, and especially to all my Haitian people, M'kito oui, now yum tune. Peace, one love.